time for December 24th, the day before Thanksgiving. As you know, this program is set aside for you to ask your questions, give your comments on any topic whatsoever, and I, as my role as host of this program, will endeavor to answer your question to the best of my ability using our Catholic faith, our tradition, the scriptures, our fathers, the saints, the doctors, the theologians, the popes, the councils, the catechisms, the encyclopedias, and just about anything I can find to help you walk away satisfied that your question has indeed been answered. We come to you every week on Wednesday at 8 p.m. to 10 p.m., and sometimes we go over. And I think our record is like 10:45, 2.75 hours, solid Q&A. And sometimes we cover a topic at the top of the program just to get things started. And today I can't help but talk about the recent convocation of our bishops to talk about the Eucharist. And as you know, things didn't turn out as well as we would like. And that's about par for the course today, but we hang in there, don't we? Anyway, I'm going to talk about that first. And as you load up your questions on the chat board, don't forget, you get, I think, 2 questions. Is it 2 questions or 3 questions? Because we try to get as many questions in as possible. And I do have to say, because of last week, we had a lot of chit chat going on, especially from one man whose name will go unmentioned at this point, but I did warn him. The only reason I don't like chit chat on the chat is because it takes up too much room, and those who want to ask questions can't ask their questions. Okay. So, I mean, if you have one comment or two you want to make, that's fine. I don't mind that. But let's not get into a full blown discussion on this chat board. There are other places you can do that if you want. This chat board is for questions. That's the kind of chat that we're looking for. I try to reserve that for questions because, today we have a lot of questions, don't we, about what's going on in the church and the world. And I try to give as many answers as I can, but I'm limited to the space that's on this chat room. So the other rule, of course, is to put the word question in front of your question and put it in capital letters so it stands out on the chat board, and I can't miss it that way. So some of you have mailed in questions, and I try to get to them when I can. So it's always a battle, like who am I going to answer first, the email questions or the chat board questions. But if I miss your question, if you emailed in a question and I missed it, feel free to write in again, because my email box is very full every day, and it's hard to get through everything. And, I have every intention of answering your question, but sometimes I just miss it. So, that's what happens when you got a lot of things to do. So, I figured by this age, I'd have a lot less things to do, but it seems like the older I get, the more I have to do. At any rate, I'm here for you, whatever, as they say. And so we'll see if we can get through it. Someone had a question about viruses. I guess COVID thing is just never goes away. So we're always having to deal with it. And some of us have to play doctor, even above the doctors that we have. Have you ever heard of an instance where you have to be your own doctor and diagnose yourself and try to figure out whether you're going to take the vaccine or not? I mean, things have gotten so out of whack. That's because there's a lot of agendas out there. and you have to sort the agendas from the true medicine, and you have to find out whether you even have a true disease these days. So that thing is always on the top of the list, and everybody's got an opinion, of course, and that's the hard part about it is you don't know who to listen to, and it's not going to get any easier. But we'll try. With God's grace, we will try our best to plow through all this. Hopefully, in another year, let's say a year from now, November 2022, this thing may be in the distant past, and we'll have to worry about it anymore. As most fads come and go, this is something that may come and go. Because those who have the agenda, they're finding out that it's not as easy as they thought it was to decrease the world's population, as the Malthusians like Bill Gates and George Soros and all those people want to do. Too many people in the world. You're a bunch of useless eaters is what you are. And yeah, these guys, they not only play God, they think they are God. And it's their duty to decrease the world's population because, for the prime specimens that we are, we're going to need a world that's clean and not corrupted by, too many human bodies eating everything on the planet and all that stuff. Okay. Sure. If you haven't heard that, you should stick around a while. You'll hear it. So about the bishops, my gosh, what do you say? The usual suspects are rising to the surface again. And, with what? At least a third of the bishopric, varies. I mean, and the count is rising. I mean, I've heard some go as high as 50%. I know the priesthood goes up that high or higher. So, I mean, these are the kind of people we're dealing with. These people of this persuasion are always liberal minded. I mean, you would have to be to condone the kind of lifestyle that you either practice or let others do. It's just, as I said, par for the course for these guys. This is what we can expect from them. And I don't think any pope, bishop, conglomeration of bishops is going to be able to clean house. The only one's going to be able to clean house is Jesus Christ himself, when he wants to do it. And I want to console you a little bit. Some people will say, well, why does God allow this to happen? It just never goes away. And blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? Look, God's setting all these jerks up for Judgment Day. Okay. And he's going to gather the evidence and allow them to lead the lives they lead. And the more they do it, the worse it's going to be for them, of course. But he's going to have all the evidence. So when the books are opened, all their deeds are going to be there, and that's how they're going to be sent to hell. So in that sense, he allows it to go on, and he allows it to go on because he doesn't want to pull up the plants with the weeds, as you know from the parable. Because if he did clean house, you and I would suffer as well. Okay. And he wants us to be productive. He wants us to produce children for the kingdom. He wants us to live good Christian lives. He wants us to practice being made in the image of God as long as we can, as long as it's reasonably possible to do. He's going to allow us to do it. Okay. What you just have to do is, keep track of your children and make sure they don't get influenced by these people because they're out there looking for them. Okay. That's the real danger of all this. They're out there looking for your children, and you've got to keep reins on them like you've never kept before and never give up. Okay. And then you got to train them so when they have children, they do the same. Okay. And if you do that, you're going to be safe. Now, that means you may be limited into what you can do, where you can go, what you can say, all those things. Yeah, you're going to be limited, but at least you'll have a good life that you can live to the honor and glory of God the best you can. Okay. So, it could be a lot worse. As the Bible says, you could suffer to the point of blood, where they do shed your blood. And some of us are shedding our blood, but not in great numbers. Okay. So, God keeps that balance between allowing us to live a reasonably okay life and keeping tabs on these sinners so that it doesn't get so bad that they totally destroy everything. Now, that day will come someday, they will completely take over. Okay. But right now, I can come to you and talk to you on this program. Okay. That means it's not that bad. At least we can talk to each other, share our concerns, our griefs, our prospects for the future, and our knowledge with each other. That's good. Okay. And some of us, of course, have been taken off for saying things. So you have to be wise in the things you say, when you say them, and who you say them to, and on whose venue you say them. Okay. We just have to be wise. That's all we can do. Do our best. Okay. Especially with the hapless bishops that we have today. When they met, I just said, here's another milestone. Not a good one. Milestones are usually something that's good. But here's another milestone for the bishops in the sense that they had the opportunity to show that they were, at least in the one thing that everybody knows is Catholic, which is the Eucharist. And we've put strictures around the Eucharist for 2,000 years. Only special people can receive the Eucharist. And Paul gives such stern warnings for those of us who would abuse that in 1 Corinthians 11. And when they were abusing it in the church of Corinth, Paul says, this is why many of you are sick and dying. Yeah, dying, he says. So God does not fool around with something like this. You abuse the Eucharist, and you will pay the price one way or the other. And it may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but it's going to come. Okay. So, and that's the problem with these bishops is I don't even know if they're bishops. No, I mean, legally they're bishops, but a bishop is somebody who has the fear of God. These people don't have the fear of God. They have the fear of men. They're afraid what the men are going to do to them if they, don't allow Joe Biden to go receive the Eucharist. They're afraid what Joe's going to do to them. Okay, but they're not afraid what God's going to do to them. That's the problem. And this is the question that every man has to answer. Do you fear God or do you fear men? Which one? Take your pick. It can't be both. It's got to be one or the other. Okay? And so that's where we are today. They don't fear God. Whatever concept of God they have, who knows what concept of God they have? Maybe that's why they don't fear him, because they just have a distorted concept of who God is. You want to know who God is? Go read the Old Testament. Yeah, find out what God did when sin occurred. And it's not going to be hard to find those chapters because it's on basically every chapter of the Old Testament. This is not a milquetoast God, as I've said before. He means what he says and says what he means, and he will come after you. If not today, then tomorrow or the next day. you are going to get your comeuppance. And you know what? I feel sorry for these guys. I really do. Deep down in my heart, they have no idea what is in store for them. I hope you guys had a chance to see Michael Voris's rally that he had in Baltimore, that he had to fight to get against all odds. The government in Baltimore, the bishops in Baltimore, the newspapers, the media, everyone was against him, trying to stop him from having his rally. Michael Voris is a man with guts. And we don't have anybody like him. Hardly. There may be one or two, a few more out there like him, but he has the greatest media attention now. Everybody knows who he is. They know what he stands for. And I just wrote him an email the other day congratulating him on his work. Anybody like that, whatever his checkered past may be, okay, let's just get that out of the way right now. This man is a man of God, and he learned his lessons, and those very lessons are what is prompting him right now to go on this warpath against these hapless bishops. And we had, as I said, another indication of how hapless they are. And, I get that word hapless from who's the bishop who used to be out in Nebraska? Oh, he even wrote an endorsement of my book. He's been out of the ministry for a while. What is his name? Anyway, he went to a meeting with these bishops, one of their, annual meetings, and they were dealing with some issue. This was like 10 years ago, and they were just like, wet noodles. And he said, what a bunch of hapless bishops. You don't hear that word too much, but he used it, and I said, right on, Bishop. It was almost there in my mind, and then it just slipped out. Anyway, I could pick up my book not by bread alone and find out which bishop it is, but he's not there anymore. Anyway, but the same bishop I had, and I hate to mention names, but his name was in the newspaper, so it's not anything dredging up here. But Bishop Kevin Rhoades, who is out in South Bend, Indiana, who was in my former diocese. He was out here in my diocese as the former bishop, the Diocese of Harrisburg. Talk about a wet noodle. This guy, he was the head of this, whatever you call it, of the bishops. And, all he would say is, well, they talked about the good thing about the Eucharist and how helpful it is and all this stuff. Yeah. But everybody already knows that, Bishop. Okay. What we don't know is whether you have a backbone or not. And a backbone would be required to deal with the politicians we have in the United States that call themselves Catholic. And we all know who they are. Joe and Nancy leading the parade. And if you don't stand up and tell them that they can't receive communion because of their obvious mortal sins, you don't deserve to be a bishop. And I hope God takes you out, okay, and replaces you with someone who's going to do the job. That's what we need today. The more you let these people go, the more they're going to step all over you. If you haven't learned that from history thus far, then you haven't learned a thing. You did this, something similar when you were here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Why they transferred you out, that's a puzzle. But you're doing the same thing again. And now you're one of the leaders of the bishops. What a sad story you are. So, but again, you're just doing what we expected. And it's going to keep on happening. And God help you. That's all I got to say. You know, I never would have thunk in coming back to the Catholic Church that I've ever would have said to my bishop, God help you. But I can say that to you, and I can say that to all the other hapless bishops that met. God help you all. You're going to find out what kind of God you're dealing with, and it's not going to be pretty. All right. So much for that. Somebody wanted to talk about viruses. Let me just address that. He wrote me an email asking, what proof we have that viruses exist, because COVID has been called a virus. And I understand all the issues in and out with whether COVID, who knows what COVID is. Okay. Now, I've heard of cases of people getting COVID, becoming sick. I've had a couple of friends of mine. One lost his mother, another almost lost his life. And so there's something there. Okay. Whether it's a virus or not, that's an issue. I agree. Okay. But then that brought up the whole issue of whether viruses exist or not. Okay. And I think that's a moot question because they have been able to isolate viruses. Okay. We have virologists who spend their whole life separating viruses so that we can identify them. The problem with the virus is there's not too many ways you can deal with it, because as opposed to a bacteria, when you get the common cold, for example, you get what they call a bacterial infection. Now, I know this because I used to work for my father, who was a doctor, medical doctor, for many years, and I used to work in his lab and had to know a lot of this stuff. And I used to do culture tests for him and watch the bacteria grow in the agar plate. And then we would put different medicines. They would come in little tabs, about the size of a pea. And you put like 10 different ones on an agar plate, and you watch which ones, and you let the bacteria grow, and then you put the medicines on there. And then you watch which ones kill the bacteria. And that's the one you prescribe to the patient. And of course, by the time you figure out which one is the one that the patient should have, the patient's already cured because his body is cured of the bacterial disease. So it wasn't always something that had the greatest timing to it. Let's put it that way. But you knew that there's something there, and bacteria are much bigger than viruses are. So you're able to see them under a microscope. I used to look at them under the microscope, and I could tell one bacteria from another. But viruses, that's a whole different story. Not only are they like, 1,000th the size of a bacteria, and bacteria themselves are small. I mean, this is not something that you can see without a very powerful microscope. But the viruses, not only are they small, but they get right inside the cell, and they eat up the cell, destroy it, and then, move on to the next one. Bacteria always, as far as I know, and unless the knowledge has changed, always attack from the outside of the cell. And they do their havoc, whatever way they can. So it slows down your functions, but it doesn't destroy your functions. But a virus is different, and that's why viruses can be lethal. Because if they get out of control, where in your white cells can't combat them, because what the white cell will do is it will just engulf the whole cell with the virus in it, and it destroys everything. It just suffocates the whole thing. So that's why your white cell count is so important. Um, and people that, sometimes you can have, white cells out of control where they grow too much, and then you get, autoimmune diseases or something like that. And if your white cell count is not high, your immune system is not making enough, then you're going to die. Okay, so and our body is constantly doing that all day long. It's fighting things that come in. So it's good to have a good immune system. And you take vitamins and you eat right and you sleep right. And if you're healthy, usually you'll survive all of those things that attack you. Even little cancers can come into your body, and your white cells take care of those, and then they're gone. And so, but eventually you get old and things start to break down, and your immune system doesn't work as well, and your lymph system doesn't work as well, and making all those things, and then you just die of old age. Okay, it's just the way things go. But viruses are very hard, and this was called a virus, I assume, because it was getting into the cells, into the lungs, and wreaking havoc there. So, but I know there's a question about what the nature of this COVID really is. Um, but, they're getting to the point where they can manufacture things that look like viruses. They can act like viruses. And as a matter of fact, they don't even know if a virus is a bacteria. They know what they function like. They have a nucleus, they have mitochondria, they have all kinds of things in them. It's like a virtual city, in whether it's a cell or a bacteria. They're very sophisticated. But viruses are such that they don't even know if they're um, what would you call it, alive, or because they have certain features of them that are mechanical instead of organic. And this makes it very difficult to pin down what exactly a virus is. So that makes it hard because they're so different than bacteria. Um, at any rate, what I'm trying to say is, I don't think there's a lot of people out there who know. They know they know this, that if they make something mechanical that acts like a virus, it can kill people. Okay, and that's the big question. Whether this thing has been manufactured and promoted to the point where it was designed to kill us. Okay, I don't know. I wish I did. And that's the problem with this whole thing. You don't know who to trust, who to listen to. This is something new on the radar screen. And we have a lot of people with agendas out there trying to exploit it. We have a lot of people who, on the other side of the fence, who have been trying to say, look, this is a false alarm. And these are doctors. These are, people who have been, who have done this all their lives. I saw a video the other day where they had scenes of hospitals all around the country where the nurses and the doctors had nothing to do. Right in the middle of the supposed COVID pandemic, because there was nobody coming into the hospital with COVID. So we know that the media is hyping this up, and they have their reasons for that. Wherein the reality is there's a lot of misinformation. All right. So look, you know, I'll try to give you what I know about this, okay, which is not much, of course, but I felt obligated to answer it because, This was a patron of mine asking about, viruses, whether we can prove it or not. We know things make us sick. That's what we know. Okay. And we do our best to try to alleviate those problems. All right. Let me get to the board here and see what we have tonight. Matthew Bennett says, "Good morning, Robert. You must be in another country somewhere then, because it sure ain't morning here." Okay, so here's the question. Here's Hareth 90. The first question we have tonight is COVID man-made? Okay, so if it's not man-made, then it was allowed to breed in the laboratory in Wuhan and then released to the public. And, I wouldn't put it past the Chinese to let something out. I mean, look, these guys are going to try to win by hook or crook, whatever they can do, so they can stay at least even with the U.S. Because basically the U.S. runs the world. Okay, we have the reserve currency, which means everybody has to buckle under to the dollar and use that as their main currency. We have the biggest army in Navy, Marines, you name it, in the world. We're in what, 200 and some odd countries? We have our army in 200 other countries. Okay, making sure everybody does what they're supposed to do, bowing down to the U.S. and its economic policies and political policies and all that. So we basically run the world. Okay. There's a lot of countries out there that don't like that. And some of them are getting together and they're trying to form a consortium of nations that will go to battle against us, whether it's a battle with guns or whether it's a battle of computers, whatever it is. They're at war right now. Okay, fighting each other. And this is the way the world has been run since day one, from Cain and Abel onward. There's always going to be a king of the hill. And everybody underneath is going to try to topple him, whoever it is. Whether it's the Babylonians or the Assyrians or the Greeks, the Romans, the English, the Spanish, whoever it is. Yeah, they were all up there, king of the hill. And now America's up there, king of the hill. And soon she will have her day where she's not king of the hill anymore. And they're fighting like crazy to keep it. We're totally bankrupt. We're $27 trillion in debt. So that means we're bankrupt. So we're just living on fumes. And the tea leaves have already told us that, look, your day is coming. It's just a matter of when. Okay. So this is what we can expect in the world. Somebody's always going to be on the top. All right. Joseph Silos. Do we really need a new document from the USCCB to tell them that Biden should not be receiving the Eucharist? Well, like, who was it? George Orwell, who says there comes a point in time where we have to repeat the obvious. Okay. Yeah, we need to have reminders because we forget what our responsibilities are and how we should be conducting ourselves. So yes, we need a document to remind us, yes, let's not forget, here's our responsibility. We bar those who are in deep sin from the Eucharist. Okay, that's our job. If they had done it from their own pulpits, we wouldn't have to have a document because they would have taken care of it for us already. Okay. But since they haven't, yeah, well, everybody needs to sit down and go back to square one and say, what are our responsibilities? Okay. That's what they should have done. Of course, And then we find out that the price tag for all this meeting of the bishops, guess what the price tag was? $28 million. Can you believe this? I mean, I was just like, wow. You see, these guys get used to eating their 3 luscious meals per day, and they get used to being waited on and called bishop and your excellency and this and that. They just love this stuff, just like the Pharisees used to do. They just love to be, as Jesus said, to be, called holy in the marketplaces and be seen by everybody as being, the leader of the religious masses and everybody fawning all over them. And they just love that stuff. And yeah, and to the price tune of $28 million to take care of all their luxuries and their hotels and their meals and all this stuff. Yeah. You know what Jesus would say if he saw that. It's what would Jesus do? WWJD. This one is WWJS. What would Jesus say? And we all know what he would say. All right. Dr. Jonathan from Australia, nice to have you with us tonight. Thank you for your greeting. I got a piece of mail back from Australia last week, and it said we're not mailing to Australia anymore from the US. Check that out for me if you could, Dr. Jonathan, because if that's the case, we got some problems we got to take care of. Got to find another way to get material to you people. No, I never got a piece of mail like that, and I may not get another one. I don't know, but that was a couple weeks ago. So I'd like to know what the story is there. Sean Marie says hello. Hello to you as well. Thanks for coming to the program. Red Stingray says, love this program, Dr. S. So awesome. Okay. Gerard O'Connor says, good evening. And Dr. Jonathan says, what's your view on the vaccine? Well, I've covered enough of that already, haven't I? All right. Glenn M., why did the Protestants reject the real presence? Well, they rejected it. Actually, Martin Luther held on to it for a while. And the Lutherans did as well. And so do the Anglicans. Okay. So it's not every Protestant denomination. It's just the ones that came, let's say, in the 1700s, 1800s. My water is running over there. I have to go turn it off. So can you excuse me for just a couple of seconds here while I take care of that, because if I don't, it'll burn out. I'll be right back. All right, so I'm back. We got well water, and if you don't catch that pump before it burns out, it will be without water. So anyway, back to the Protestants. So Luther kept it for a while. Well, the Lutherans did continually, but they had a different idea of it than the Catholics did. They believed in what they call consubstantiation instead of transubstantiation. Okay. Now, transubstantiation is The word trans means that you are replacing the substance of the bread. And the new substance is the body of Christ. Okay. Consubstantiation, the word con, the prefix con, means with. And so they believe that the body of Christ comes alongside of the bread, and the bread remains there as real bread. So you basically have two substances, if you want to put it that way, existing together in the Eucharist, the body of Christ and the actual bread. Okay. And they had a debate about how long that would be the case. And I think one of the sides of the debate said that as long as the mass is going on, Luther still had a mass, okay, for a while. But they didn't know why they were having it, because theologically, if you believe in faith alone, then there's no reason for a mass unless you want to pray. But then why would you have the Eucharist? Because it's supposed to be a sacrifice. And why would you need a sacrifice if you believed in faith alone? So, as things began to fall apart, they were picking up pieces and trying to. It's like Humpty Dumpty. Once Humpty Dumpty falls from the wall and shatters into 1,000 pieces, and you don't know anything else except to pick up some of these pieces and put them back together, and you may not have all the pieces back together. Well, that's what happened to the Lutherans, basically. They picked up some of the pieces that were shattered and tried to put them back into the puzzle, and they just didn't fit anymore. You see, because it's either a whole Humpty Dumpty or it's not, okay? If you have a few holes in the Humpty Dumpty, it's not the same Humpty Dumpty anymore. It's not going to function. It's not going to hold everything together. If there was some liquid in Humpty Dumpty, the holes in Humpty Dumpty's shell, the liquid would seep out, you see, and that's what happened with the Lutherans. So it really didn't make any sense for them to have the Eucharist, but, I guess one thing at a time for Luther to deal with, okay? So that was the basic problem. And so that was the first shift that we had away from transubstantiation, and that was defined by the Lateran Council of 1215. Okay, and they actually used the word transubstantiation. Now, to tell you how hard this was, if it was in 1215 was the first time that the Catholic Church dogmatized the Eucharist, and she really didn't deal with it at that time, except that she had some people that were objecting to the Catholic understanding of the Eucharist, at least what they knew. In the he comes from the Berengarius, came from, I forget which century, 11th century. So Berengarius, and you can read Not by Faith Alone. I give a whole history of this. Who was objecting, why they were objecting. This is before Luther ever came along. Okay, so we had people in the Catholic Church objecting to the Eucharist. And I cover that whole history in the book, so you can read it for yourself if you have Not by Bread Alone. But from day one, when Jesus says, "This is my body, take and eat," you have to make a decision. And that is, did he really mean what he just said? That we have to eat his body? And if so, how am I going to do that? Okay, so your logic as a man that you can't escape is immediately going to impinge on this very question. Because, when we sit down and eat a meal, we see the substance of the food, we eat it. And we know it does something in our body and gives us energy and we can function. Okay. But if Jesus is asking us to eat his body, first of all, did he really mean that? Or is it symbolic? Did he mean like, just remember me? Because we even use that word, remembrance. Do this in memory of me. Okay, well, if I eat the bread, I can think of Jesus and I can memorialize it in the service, and there's the memory. We can all understand that logically, but that's not where it goes. Okay, it goes much deeper than that. And the church fathers said, look, we've got one or two ways to go on this, and that is we treat it symbolically, or we treat it as the actual body of Christ. And there ain't no other Christ, okay? It ain't some other form of Christ. It's Christ. However you want to know Christ, that's it in the Eucharist. Okay? Yeah, of course you can't see it. Okay? And you don't taste it. You taste bread. Okay? Which is another mystery altogether. Okay? But you are taking the Christ. There's only one body, one soul, one divinity, one blood of Christ. You got it in the Eucharist. Okay? It can't be something else. It can't be something similar to Christ or another form of Christ or whatever. It's Christ. All right? That's what he said. If we're going to take it literally, that's what it is. Okay? No two ways about that. All right. Okay, I accept that. Now, the next question is, how's that going to happen? I mean, is it just a miracle? Okay, if that's the case, I can accept it. Somehow, Christ's body, soul, divinity, spirit, and blood come in there to the Eucharist. I can't see it. It's held there by a miracle of God. Just like, he called, the universe ex nihilo, out of nothing, just appeared. Okay, I can accept that too. Okay. And that's what they basically did. The fathers did. Then that was a big, big step. If they had chosen the wrong way, we would not have the same Catholic faith today. Okay, that's how big of a step that was. Now, we understand that they didn't learn this by themselves. Okay, this is what the church believed. Why? Because the first apostles believed it. They were right there at the Last Supper when Jesus said those words. Okay, so they had to make the decision. Is this some symbolic parable that Jesus is talking in, like he always used to talk in parables? Or is this the real stuff, the real thing? Okay, and they decided it was the real thing. And then they passed that on to the churches. And then the fathers picked up on that and wrote about it. And that's why they all agree about what the Eucharist is. But it's not an easy concept. Okay, so now they had the Greeks, fathers especially, who they all knew Greek, of course. The Greek language is a very sophisticated language. They have hundreds of thousands of words compared to Hebrew, which had about 8,000 words. The Greeks had, as they say, had a word for everything. You could use a Greek verb in about 100 different ways. And so it's very sophisticated. And so the Greek fathers came up with probably about, at least a dozen ways by 12 different Greek words of how to explain what was going on in the Eucharist. And one of the best ones, I think, was from, who was that from? not sure. This might forget. Anyway, it was the Greek word metausios. Okay, metausio. There's a very sophisticated word. Metausio. Usios is substance. Meta is change. So you got change in substance. Okay. And that was probably the closest word to transubstantiation. So what I'm trying to say is even the fathers at that time knew, theologically speaking, that there was a change in the bread, that the substance, the usios, had changed. It was no longer bread. Okay. And so they went with this idea, and all these other Greek words that they used, and they all fit perfectly for 1,200 years until, Berengarius and his people started objecting, and then the church had to really nail down the brass tacks. And just like she did with the incarnation and the Trinity in the first 3-4 centuries or so, she did the same thing with the Eucharist. This is finally the time that she had to deal with it. And the church doesn't usually deal with it. She'll go on in her belief, and everybody believes the same thing, and there's no dogma. There might be an official statement here or there, but no dogma, no infallible dogma. Until she reaches the point where she gets people, going left and right, and just like they did with the Trinity and the Incarnation. We had about 12 different views of just the Trinity, much less the Incarnation in the first centuries of the church. And the church had to sift these things out one by one and get down to, what the Trinity really was. And as I say often, she didn't even tell us exactly what it was. She told us what we can't say. Okay. You can't say it's 3 modes of existence. You can't say that it's really the Father and the Holy Spirit and Jesus are just, phantoms. They come out somehow or in the Father. You have to say there's 3 separate personalities and there's one God. And that's about all she could tell us. Okay. Other than that, we really don't know. We just accept the reality of it by faith. And we won't know until we get to heaven. Really know it. Okay. So she did the same thing with the Eucharist, sorted it all out, said, here's what it is, here's what it isn't. Okay. This is the dogma. Okay. And then, of course, you're going to get people to disagree with that, especially in the Reformation period, where basically they're going to throw out everything and start over. They're going to reinvent the wheel, which is what they did. Okay. All right. Enough on that. Let's go to question. What is the testing yourself Paul is referring to in 2 Corinthians 13:5? I was just looking at that today, as a matter of fact. And one of my favorite passages. And especially in 2 Corinthians, Paul says it also in 2 Corinthians chapter 6. Basically the same thing. He says, test yourself, make sure you're in the faith, unless you have believed in vain. And, because these Corinthians, this was a rough crowd. The city of Corinth was a rough city. It was a port city, very famous, very robust, all kinds of people going in and out of it. You never knew what you were going to get in Corinth. And they had so many problems. When you read 1 Corinthians, every chapter has a problem that Paul's dealing with. Of course, that's why you write a letter. You're dealing with the problems. And the thing is, they hadn't solved a lot of these problems by the time he wrote the second letter. And he kept warning them, I'm going to come to you. And when I come to you, you think my letters are bad? You wait till I talk to you face to face. Okay. And oh, Paul, man, there's nobody like Paul. He did not let anything go unnoticed, believe me. True man of God, and suffered tremendously. I mean, if there's anybody who paid up for his sins, I think it was St. Paul. All the sins he committed before he became a Christian, murdering Christians and being, as he says, a Pharisee. Boy, he made up for those, I think. At any rate, these Corinthians were a rough crowd, and they were always pushing the limits. And then they got to the point where they're testing Paul's authority. Who are you? Who really are you, Paul? Okay, you scrawny little. He had a problem with that. He was probably a small little guy, and not intimidating at all. Everything that he did to influence people came from his intellect, trapping them in their own juices, so to speak. So, and that's a hard job to keep up with all the time. And so they're questioning his authority at the end of the game. And Paul says, okay, look, I didn't want to do this, but you forced me to it. So you want to know about my authority? Well, let me tell you a little story. And he goes into the story of 2 Corinthians chapter 12. It's one chapter before the end of 2 Corinthians. And he says, I knew a man, whether in the body or out of the body, I don't know, went up to the third heaven and saw unspeakable things. And why is he doing this? He's doing this because he's trying to show them, look, I tried to deal with you on a level man to man, telling you how you should live your life and all that comes with that. And you're constantly testing me, constantly. So let me tell you the real story. I saved the best for last. I went up to heaven and I saw God and the angels. And I saw things that were just, like Thomas Aquinas, when he had his experience, was it 3 months before he died? He had a vision of heaven. And then he said, after it was over, he goes, what I saw is just unbelievable. All my teachings are like straw compared to what I saw in this vision of God and heaven. Okay, well, that's the experience that Paul had. But he kept it to himself. See, Paul didn't go around bragging, hey, Corinthians, you know what I did? I went up to heaven. I'm something special. And so you need to bow to me. No, he tried to deal with them on the level, man to man, giving the principles of life from logic and from human empathy, all those natural things he tried to use, like father and son. Okay. You want to get to the heart of people and deal with them on that level and not have to force them to obey because a bolt of lightning is going to strike them from heaven. That's the last thing you want to do. That's when you've lost them, when you have to depend on a bolt of lightning to knock sense into them. Okay. But they pushed him to the edge. So at the end of his second letter to them, he's gone for the bolt of lightning, so to speak. And that's because they're not listening to him. And there's a lot of false teachers around. As a matter of fact, in the chapter before that, 2 Corinthians 11, he points out, look, there's these false teachers. And don't be surprised if Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light. That's what these false teachers are doing to you. And a lot of them were the Judaizers. These Jews who were still unrepentant, unconverted, and still thought that Judaism was the way to go. And they were constantly trying to get inside the churches that Paul established to disrupt them. Galatians, which is the next chapter after 2 Corinthians, same problem, even worse than the 2 Corinthians. Okay. So that's why he comes in and says, test yourself to see if you're in the faith. How do you test yourself? Well, are you following after different gospels? Or are you staying with what I taught you? Okay. This is the big test. Are you living the moral life? Obeying the 10 commandments? Or are you secretly sinning and trying to hide it? Okay. This is how you test yourself. And it's not that hard to do. Okay. And the reason he's telling them to test themselves is because he says a lot of you have turned from the faith. You are no longer walking in the faith. That's in verse 20 of the previous chapter, which then leads to verse 5 of chapter 13. Okay. So, yeah, and you better check to see if you're in the faith, because if you don't, then you're going to fall all the way. And you're just as good as any unsaved person who's never heard the gospel. As a matter of fact, you're worse, because you've heard the gospel and then you've spurned it. And you're going to have a greater punishment than someone who's never heard the gospel. Okay. So, yeah, very important chapter. If you never read 2 Corinthians, boy, I tell you, it's one of my favorites in the New Testament. Because it's just, boy, Paul gets right down what it is to be a human being, a Christian human being in a world that hates you. And how are you going to live in that? How are you going to survive? You know, you're going to pull the authority card and, beat everybody over the head? Or are you going to be Mr. Nice Guy and try to accommodate everybody? Or is there somewhere in between? This is the things that Paul is struggling with these, because this is an infant church. You don't want it. And as a matter of fact, Paul knows he's under responsibility from God, that God expects some good return from his investment in Paul. And Paul feels that. Okay. This is a guy that's also under pressure from God, that you better do a good job and don't fluff off. Don't think it's just going to come automatically. I'm going to press the red button for you and it's just going to fall or just going to happen and you can just skate through. No, this was day in and day out, drudgery, not having enough people, food, too many people against you every single day. He had this to worry about, and he talks about it in 2 Corinthians. Okay. And then trying to get money out of them also is another task, and he does that like in 3 chapters in 2 Corinthians, because there are these poor churches. See, Corinth was a thriving city. Everybody had money. And then the question was, are you going to give some of that to these other places that don't have as much as you do? And one of them was in Jerusalem. They were trying to raise funds for the Jerusalem church, but it was just hanging by a thread. Okay, so that's another thing he had to do. And then you had to find the right people to do it. Honest people who are not going to take from the till. Okay, so I mean, this guy had some, wow. And you read like in 2 Timothy where it says, the end of my life is here. I believe I have fought the good fight. I have stuck to it. I have never walked away from my responsibility. But he says, even then in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, he says, but I'm not the one who judges myself. It's Jesus who's going to judge me. And he's even going to judge my motives. Okay, right down to the very motive. of why I'm doing this and how I'm doing it and who I'm picking and all this stuff. Okay. So, you know what? I'll be glad when it's all over, just like Paul. I bet you he was glad to say, look, I've done my job. It's over. I'm ready to go. Okay. I'm getting to that point myself where, I agree with him. I'm ready to go. All right. Hopefully someone else can take over the job, but it's not an easy job keeping all these things balanced as he did and trying to save this infant church. Because if it goes down, can you imagine if the Corinthian church went down? All this time, effort, suffering, all the people involved. We have to keep it, but we can't keep it afloat by artificial means. See, that's the hard part is you can't get preachers in there that, give people gifts and promises and that they're never going to be kept to try to bring in the crowds. Okay. And then he's complaining about the Jew and the Greek coming in. And the Jews, they want signs. And the Greeks, they want the wisdom of the philosophers. And if you don't talk about Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, then you're no good. And the Jews, if you don't do signs and wonders and things, then, the heck with you. We'll go somewhere else. He had to worry about that too. You see? So, and you had to build a church with good people, not the fluff that's out there. They're looking for all kinds of bad things. And they want to bring them into the church so that the church can sanction them. Okay? Yeah, it was tough that he had to deal with all these kinds of things. All right. Question: do you still do debates, and if yes, how could one be organized? Yeah, most of my debates now are done on the internet. Most of my talks are done on the internet now. I very rarely go out. I did go out to our geocentric conference, but that cost a lot of money, and it took a lot of time to organize, and it's just not worth it. Organizing public debates now is just if you find somebody who has the money, you're going to need $10,000. You're going to need someone who puts 100 man hours into it to organize it. You can find somebody like that, great. Okay, we can do it. Otherwise, the internet is where it's at. It doesn't cost any money. You just have to show up. And, and you have to have a good moderator. Okay. But I'm open to doing public debates. As a matter of fact, if you really want to nail somebody, doing a public oral debate is probably the best way. Because in a formal debate like that, you're going to have what they call a cross-examination period. And that's just, they call it cross-examination because they take it from the courtroom. You're going to the attorney is going to cross-examine the witness. And you know what happens when that happens. Okay. You're going to find out, if you're a good lawyer, whether this guy is telling the truth or not, or whether he's just, has a lot of fluff and all that. And that's why public debate is good. Okay. Without that, it's not worth the time. I mean, if somebody just wants to, give their spiel about what they believe, take a couple questions from the audience, that's all well and good, but that's not a real debate. Okay. Real debate has to have an extensive cross-examination period. If anybody wants to organize one of those, pay for it, invite the other guy, I'll be there. Okay. That's all I can say. But other than that, it's going to take a lot more to get me out of my chair. Okay. What do you think of Father Michel or Michael Rodriguez? I don't know. Father Michael Rodriguez or Rodriguez. Maybe you spelled it wrong. Yeah, you'll have to direct me to a place where I can see him in action for me to give an opinion. Otherwise, I just don't recognize the name. All right, Sean Marie says, why don't you believe in Divine Mercy, St. Faustina, JP2, Divine Mercy Sunday, church approved? Well, Sean, it's not that I don't believe them in the sense that, if others want to believe them, that's fine. Okay. I am very particular about who I follow, why I follow, when I follow, how I follow. Okay. I'm much more discriminating about those things than your average Catholic. Okay. But you don't have to take my example. Okay. I mean, just because I do it doesn't mean you have to do it. All right. We have a lot of freedom in the Catholic Church. The church tells us that anything that's not dogma, we don't have to believe. Okay. And I take that, I take that very seriously. Okay. Now the practical reason why I don't, you know, fall all over these kinds of things is because I have a hard time. Well, let's put it this way. I am very skeptical about anyone who claims anything from heaven. Okay. And that's because I am very concerned about myself or others being deceived. Okay. There's a lot of charlatans out there who have a lot of visions and a lot of this and a lot of that, whether it's tongue speaking or miracles here, miracles there. Jesus says an adulterous generation seeks after a miracle. That's another reason why, because if you're hunting for miracles, that means something's wrong with your faith. Okay. We live by faith, not by sight. The minute I find myself, trying to depend on miracles or this or that, it's not good. It means my faith is weak. Okay. We don't need those things. Now, that doesn't mean Sister Faustina is illegit at all. I'm not saying that. Okay. If you want to follow divine mercy, and now this is not to say that there's not a controversy behind it. Okay. Which leads me to be skeptical. Okay. I don't come at this just, willy nilly and say, I just don't feel like believing in Sister Faustina, No, there is a controversy. Okay. And I err on the side of caution in those things. But that's just me. Okay. Just me. You do what you feel is best. Okay. In this area here, you are free to do whatever you want. Okay. And we'll just leave it at that if you don't mind. Okay. All right. Facebook user says, hey, Bob, if you get a chance to listen to my debate versus Peter Diamond on BOD, what was that? What does that refer to? BOD? Baptism of desire, I think. Yeah. Let me know what you think. Thanks. Bless. Okay. All right, Facebook user. Why don't you leave me your name? Or did your mom name you Facebook? That would be nice to know who I'm listening to. Okay. And I think the other people here would appreciate that. Okay. All right. John Everett Button says, question, Dr. Sungenis, why does the church teach Mary's perpetual virginity? It seems like such a trivial detail to take a dogmatic claim on when we don't have strong evidence that I'm aware of. Well, we have the testimony of the church, okay? Jerome being probably the principal one on this issue. The one who did the most exegetical work on it is Jerome. And it becomes important for that reason in itself. Okay. If the church has a tradition that's upheld by not only Jerome, but by the consensus of the fathers, and even Luther believed in a perpetual virginity, as far as I understand. There was a mystique around virginity that persisted for many centuries in the Catholic Church. Now, when I say mystique, I don't mean to imply that there's something false about the mystique. When I say mystique, I am saying that it was a theological belief that we had about virginity, in which virginity gave a woman a status that was high, okay, very high, with a lot of respect, a lot of honor, okay? So, as opposed to, now I don't mean to be crass about this, but there were and are women in history who exploit their sexuality and to varying degrees. All you have to do is turn on the TV or watch the internet. And today I was doing a search for some particular artwork, and a naked woman pops up on the screen, okay, along with all the other pictures, okay. So it's like, this is the opposite extreme of virginity, okay. This is how far the feminine body and sex can be exploited, to the other extreme, okay. So the further you get away from that extreme to the other side, to virginity, okay, it creates a certain image, a certain, as I said, mystique about that state of life, okay. And that's what was given to Our Lady. She had the highest form of the feminine sexual, feminine sex that could be given to a woman, okay. And the church wanted to preserve that for her. If indeed it is the case that she had no relations with men, then the church was going to do whatever, and that's true, then the church is going to do whatever it can to preserve that status for her, because that's what heaven gave to her, and that's what the church is going to preserve, to give her the highest honor, okay. Now, it's not saying there's anything wrong with marriage, okay. It's just that Mary is as far away from exploiting the feminine sexuality as is possible, because she never had relations with men, never flirted with men, never got involved anyway with men, never touched a man, in a sexual way, nothing like that. She's totally on the other side of the fence, okay? And the church does her best to preserve that for her, okay? So that's where it all starts. Then it's just a matter of the fathers preserving that belief, which they did, every one of them, okay, and the medievals did, and that we can even exegete from Scripture, okay. I mean, in my Matthew commentary, I go to painstaking detail to show us how we can defend the doctrine of the perpetual virginity of Mary. Okay, I go into the Greek and the Hebrew, and if you've never read it, then I suggest you take a gander at it. Okay, it's in the Matthew commentary, and it's in the Apologetics Center, in the apologetics section in the back of the book, and it's probably about, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 pages long. Okay. So it's all there. So that's why we defend it. Because, first of all, it's true. If it's true, we'll defend it as Catholics. And what are our tools? Tradition and scripture. And of course, the magisterium. That's what the church has officially taught. Okay. So I can't argue against that, right? All right. All right. See, we have a question. Lee Jennifer Corlu Aries. You're a newcomer, I think. Can we do rosary processions without priests? Well, yes, you can. No, nobody's going to stop you from praying the rosary anywhere at any time. Okay, you pray at any time you want with as many people as you want. Now, it'd be good to have a priest. Okay, that's the best way. But what if you can't find a faithful priest? What are you going to do? Sit home? Do nothing? No, you can get as many people. That's exactly what God wants to see. Okay, going out there and doing those things. So, yes, would be my answer. Okay. Bjorn Ringdahl. Hope I'm saying that correctly, Bjorn. I know I'm saying your first name correctly, Bjorn. I don't know why you guys put the J's in there. Because you know how we're tempted to say that. Anyway. May we assume that the USCCB as an organization is serving the dark side? Yeah, you get a lot of that in Catholicism there, Bjorn. Okay, you get groups or people that are officially members of the Catholic Church, but are doing, the work of the devil. Okay, you're going to get that a lot. All right, just because the name Catholic is on it doesn't mean it's, for God. So that's something we've had to live with throughout history. Okay. If you were the devil, where would you attack? You're going to go right to where the heart of the functioning is, and that's right inside the church. Okay. Just take it like I said at the beginning of the program. How many homosexual priests and bishops do we have right inside the church giving sacraments? Okay. Yeah, a lot. So there you have it. Doing the work of the devil inside the official bounds of the Catholic Church. Okay. All right. Question. Why do you think the bishops and others like James Martin? What do you think? James Martin is a flaming homosexual. Okay. He is no more functioning as a proper priest than anybody else who's in the same boat. All right. How these guys are allowed to go from city to city giving their lectures and, talking their frilly language and being nice and all this stuff, it's mind boggling that this is allowed to go. Well, the reason it's allowed to go on, because all the other guys are like him. They're all like him. He's just got the biggest mouth out there doing his thing. Okay. This guy's no more of Jesus than the devil is himself, whether he has a Roman collar or not. But this is the kind of church that we have today. Get used to it. Okay. Question. Good evening, Robert. Oscar Bornacelli. How you doing, Oscar? What do you think of the heliocentric argument that the atmosphere rotates with the Earth? They say it's just like traveling on a train where you flip coin and it falls. Yeah, because the atmosphere is in the gravity envelope of the Earth. So it's going to, if the Earth rotates, it's going to rotate with the Earth. Okay. But that doesn't prove anything. Okay. All it proves is that you have gravity. We all believe in that, whether you're heliocentric or geocentric. Okay. Now, if you're a geocentric, of course, the Earth doesn't move. Okay. So what's going to happen? Well, the clouds that you see, they're going to be in the gravity envelope of the Earth, but they're also going to move by the wind currents. Okay. But what's moving? Well, what's moving is the firmament. Okay. And inside the firmament is the atmosphere. All right. Now, the atmosphere can be held by the gravity of the Earth, at least to a certain extent, maybe up to 100 miles. All right. After that, there is no atmosphere because the Earth can't hold it. Okay. So, but the firmament, because it's part of the whole universe, is going to be rotating around the Earth. Okay. So there's a difference between the firmament and its substance and the atmosphere or air and its substance. Two different things is what you'll have to keep in mind there. All right. Lawrence, he says, very, or a nice new thumbnail. Yeah, that was Jonathan's choice. And I said, he says, do you like that new thumbnail I've got for you? And I said, yeah. I said, it makes me look like Jordan Peterson. And you're saying you're very sexy. Yeah, very sexy. Not that I tried to do that, it was just a program that I did that he got the thumbnail from. So, all right. Question here from in a hand basket. How do you guys come up with these things? Anyway, it says, why do you think that the bad bishops and priests, even PF, Pope Francis, I assume, seem to be unafraid of hell and damnation? It seems so self-destructive to me. Are they really gambling that they will have time? You see, the very reason you and I can believe in hell and have the fear of God is because we have the grace of God. Okay. That's why. And God instills that into us so that we will continue to obey him. But by grace, that's how we know it. Okay. So if someone doesn't believe in hell or doesn't have the fear of God, which is rare, we have to say, not having the fear of God is rare, except nowadays, there's more people that don't have a fear of God. I mean, just look at their activity. But that's all by the grace of God still. Okay. So if these guys are going to parading around with their, homosexual lifestyles and don't have the fear of God, that's because they don't have the grace of God. Okay. Which makes sense. Anybody who's even condoning homosexuality, much less living in it, they don't have the grace of God. They do not have sanctifying grace. They may have a little actual grace here and there by the mercy of God, but I question even that. Okay. So that's why they go, bon vivant around the country acting like they do. All right. Let me see. What other Sean Marie says, you said we don't have to forgive a person until they ask for forgiveness. Yes. Where do you get that from? Oh gosh, there's many places. Let me do this for you, since that seems to be a hot topic. I'm going to get all those verses together. So that you can be convinced of that. And a lot of them are from the book of Sirach, by the way, which, as I have said before, is one of the greatest books ever written in the Bible for practical living. If you've ever wanted to just open the Bible and read a book of the Bible I would suggest you open up or it's also called Ecclesiasticus. Okay. And I will get all those verses together for you, I promise. And we will meet what? Next Wednesday, which would be the 1st of December. Okay. Let me write that down. And I'm going to get all those verses together for you. Okay. And make sure you're back here at that time, because this is a topic that I think everybody needs to hear. All right. Okay. Bishop Joseph Strickland speaks the truth. So I've heard. And I've written a letter to him. I haven't gotten a response yet. So I'll take your word for it. I don't know him personally. But I hear he's a good man. All right. Question. Oscar says, question, would it be too difficult to find a document where NASA uses the centrifugal and Coriolis as real forces in order to make their probes to work properly? Do they try to hide this? No, because the equation you have to use is a standard equation. The National Weather Service used to have it on their website. I haven't been there in years, so I can't tell you whether. Oh, Bruskowitz, Fabian Bruskowitz. Thank you, Lawrence. That's the bishop that was in the meeting, as I said, about 10 years ago, and he called all the bishops there hapless bishops. Fabian Bruskowitz. How could I forget? And anyway, Oscar, there's a standard equation that the National Weather Service has to use, okay, as an example, because it's the same principle as if NASA was going to send a probe to Mars or Jupiter. They both have to use the same equation. The National Weather Service uses it because they have to tell how fast the wind currents are going, okay? And the only way they can do that is they have to transfer the Newtonian equations from their rotating Earth that rotates with the winds, okay, into and that's a non-inertial frame. They have to use that equation to transfer the non-inertial frame of the rotating Earth into an inertial frame of a non-rotating Earth in order to tell the difference between how fast the Earth is rotating and how fast it is, the wind speed would be without the Earth rotating. Okay. So certain how they figure that all out, but they have to compare one against the other to get the true value of the wind currents. And whenever you transfer from an accelerating frame or a non-inertial frame, as you do when you have rotation, into a non-inertial or non-accelerating frame, you have to use this equation that incorporates the centrifugal, Coriolis, and Euler forces, all three of them. Okay. So go look on the National Weather Service, see if you can find the equation that they use for calculating wind currents, and you'll see it for yourself. Standard equation. Every single physics lab, astronomical place, whatever, they all use the same equation. And that's because it's required when transferring from an accelerating frame to a non-accelerating frame. There you have it. Okay. That's why they have to use it. So it's very basic. It's no big secret. All right. They all know it. But see, they all haven't, you see, they know the data. It's like they know what it takes to make the measurements. Okay. I mean, you have to add 2 and 3 to get 5. You know you have to do that, okay? But what the 2 really means, it's 2 of what? And 3 of what? And that's the problem. You see, they haven't gone deep into the equation. They just know the equation works, but they really don't know. They haven't thought it all out, let's say, and connected all the dots about why the equation is required in the first place and what would happen if you basically reverse the equation. Okay. And you say, well, what makes it 5? Well, it could be 2 plus 3 or 1 plus 4 or, the square root of 16 plus 1. There's all kinds of ways you could get to 5. And so why is it that it's only this way? And what would happen if we reverse that? Okay. So this is when you begin to think beyond just the equation itself and you see how the equation can be applied, then you begin to see the whole cosmology open up into one of not just being heliocentrically possible, but being geocentrically possible. Okay. And again, I'm not the first one to figure this out. All right. I thank Uncle Albert and Uncle Mock for telling me about this. And then I diligently applied it to, the Bible and the church and the fathers and everything else and found out that, hey, we've been led down the wrong path because nobody's actually asked those crucial questions about what does this equation really mean and how can we apply it to help the church? Well, I've done it. So I opened the door. Hopefully there'll be others that follow. Question, is the literal existence of Adam and Eve dogma? Yes, it is. Because without a literal Adam and Eve, we have no original sin. Without original sin, we have no baptism. Without baptism, we have no sacraments. Without the sacraments, we have no salvation. Okay? We have no gospel. So that's how important Adam and Eve are. Also, without a literal Adam and Eve, we have no Christ. Therefore, we have no Savior. Therefore, we have no salvation. Therefore, we're all damned. Okay? You know those genealogies that you read about in Genesis 5 and Genesis 11? Starting from Adam down to Seth, down to Enosh, down to Kenan, down to so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. Where do they all lead? They all lead to Jesus Christ. Okay? That's why the genealogies are given, so that we have a clear line from Adam to Christ. Because without Adam, we don't have Christ. Okay? That's why it's important. And we're only here for one thing, and that's for salvation. That's it. If there was no reason to have salvation, we would not exist here on this earth. There would be no reason for God to have us on this earth. We're only here for one reason, and that's to be saved from this earth, because it's all going to be destroyed. Okay? That's how important Christ is. And you can't have Christ without Adam. You can't have the second Adam without the first Adam. Okay? So that's why evolution is of the devil. Okay? And any Catholic who believes in it is believing a doctrine of the devil. Okay? Because without Adam, you have no Christ. You basically have no Catholic Church. You have a shell, but you don't have anything close to what was meant to be, dealing with Adam, his sin, original sin, all that stuff, baptism and all that. Okay? So, yeah, that's why it's all important. All right. Thesivrin, I can't even pronounce your name there, whatever that is. I know it's not your name. Do Catholics maintain that people are justified the same way throughout time? Yes. Okay, so the cross came at a specific point in time, and it had to, as I just explained. Okay, but the effects of the cross extend all the way into the past and all the way into the future. Okay. So that's why St. Paul can use Abraham as an example of someone who's justified in Romans chapter 4, and David. Okay. Abraham came before the Mosaic law, 600 years before the Mosaic law. He was basically a Gentile when he became saved, when he became justified. That's an interesting thing that, that our Jewish friends don't like to hear. Well, Paul says Abraham was justified when he was a Gentile. How do we know that? Because it says before he was circumcised. And to be circumcised, you were a Jew. Okay. Abraham saved as a Gentile, and then he became a Jew. You see, and that's why Paul says we can be saved, because Abraham's our father, our Gentile father. All right. So, well, how can he be justified? Because the effects of the cross go back in time. That's how Abel could be justified. He's in Hebrews chapter 11 as a man of faith, saved by Christ. And Noah. Okay. And Moses and David and all the other heroes of the faith are all justified the same way by the redemption of Christ on the cross. All right. Dr. Jonathan says, Voris is no good as he hates and slanders the SSPX. I go to an SSPX chapel. Our priest and people are blessed and amazing. Well, Dr. Jonathan, if this does something to harm our friendship, I'm going to tell you straight out. I believe exactly what Voris believes about the SSPX. Okay. So I believe that there is no jurisdiction that the SSPX has. I believe the history proves that. I just had a good friend of mine, John Salsa, leave the SSPX after what? I think 15 years in the SSPX because he found out they have no jurisdiction. Now, this man's a lawyer, and he uses his legal mind to go in. He's written, I don't know how many books about various topics. If there's anybody I would trust, it would be John Salsa dealing with this topic. He's been in and out of it, and he knows every wrinkle of the arguments that are there. And I think Voris did a good job in summing it up. So I'm going to be very honest with you. Okay. I'm not going to, tiptoe around this. I believe exactly what they believe. You need to be on the inside of the church fighting. You can't do anything outside except, your own, devotion or whatever you think's, happening. Yeah, all for yourself, of course, but you need to be inside the church fighting to get this church back where it's supposed to be. The whole problem with the SSPX is it's been outside trying to knock inside, and that's impossible to do. You're not going to do anything. You need to fight inside. And that's where we need the forces today. Okay. So you'll have to pardon me for being perfectly honest with you, but that's all I do on this show. I'm going to be perfectly honest about what my opinion is. Take it or leave it. All right. Sean Marie question. What about the snit between Michael Voris and Mike Parrott? I don't know about that. You'll have to tell me what that's about. I don't keep up with all the, the gossip. Okay. So I just, I try to avoid that as much as possible. When a man stands up and gives the truth about what's happening in the church today and doesn't care who, comes after him and who tries to silence him, that's the man I'm going to listen to. Okay. Because we all know what the condition of the church is. We just need more and more people to stand up for it. And he gave a list. Where was that? All the other Catholic institutions regularly on their own venues on the air or the internet or whatever. St. Anthony Messenger, Ave Maria Radio, CNA, which is Catholic News Agency, Catholic News Service, EWTN, National Catholic Register. I think both owned by the Opus Dei, isn't it? Here's another organization that I have questions about. Relevant Radio, our Sunday Visitor, none of them came to Voris's help. They all were silent, as they usually are, when we deal with these various, very serious topics about the condition of the church, and as the bishops especially, they just want status quo. Let's pretend we didn't hear that. Let's just give the people positive news. This is the MO of all these organizations I just mentioned. There's probably a few others, the Catholic League, CUF, Catholics United for the Faith, you name it. So they are also people that need to be fighting on the inside, okay, to get these bishops back where they're supposed to be. Instead of, pretending that, well, we won't say anything because, our numbers may decline and we'll lose money and all this stuff. Well, if that's the case, then if that's what you don't think God's going to help you and allow you to survive by preaching the truth, okay, then you don't believe in God. You don't have the faith. Okay. If your whole show and what it says is run by what's popular and how people are going to, love you because of, the good things you say, and you're afraid to meet up with negativity because you might, step on somebody's toes, then you don't deserve to be in ministry. Okay. You're doing more harm than good. All right. Is it possible to be Catholic and hold to annihilationism? Not at this point. Okay. The church has not said anything in that direction. So, we believe that hell is for eternity. Okay. Now, this idea has been kicked around somewhat, and Pope Francis himself has kicked it around, believe it or not. But until, the church says something in that direction, then, we don't have the right to go in that direction. Okay. No matter how accommodating that doctrine may be. We can write our papers to the CDF and say, the church should consider this or this, or a form of this or whatever. You can do that all you want. Okay. But as far as teaching it as a teaching of the Catholic Church, no. All right. Chaldean says, I studied economics. You need consumers to spend and you need producers to make products. Depopulizing the world will ruin consumership. Do you really believe in this conspiracy theory? Well, let's put it this way. I believe in the people that have talked about it. Otherwise, they're liars. Okay. Bill Gates, George Soros, and many other people prior to them are what they consider themselves to be Malthusian. That is, there's too many people in the world. Now, I'm sure they wouldn't disagree with you that you need consumers to produce products and you need consumers to buy products. Okay. What they're concerned is that you have too many rats in a cage and they'll start devouring one another. You can have so many rats in a cage, maybe 20 rats, but if you have 60 rats or 100 rats, what are they going to, they're going to be killing each other. Okay. So that's what their concern is. Not so much the idea that they would disagree with, production and consumers and all that kind of stuff. Anybody with 2 cents can understand that. But they're concerned with overpopulation, as they call it. Okay. Now, in order to fight this idea, this henny penny idea, the sky is falling because we have 8 billion people in the world, and we have too many eaters and not enough, places to grow food and all this kind of stuff. What was I saying the other day was I think I have it right here, as a matter of fact. Still have the stat. The U.S., United States, including Alaska, has 2.26 billion acres. A family of four, okay, yeah. If you have a family of four, that makes 8 billion people. Each person or each family would have an acre of land to grow their crops. That's pretty good. In other words, you could fit the world's population, 8 billion people, and the typical family is, two parents and two children. Each of them would have an acre of land. Okay. So the world isn't overpopulated. The world has 37 billion acres. For 8 billion people, that equals 5 acres of land for every person, 20 acres of land for every family of four. Okay? So there's the stats. So the world is not overpopulated. So in that sense, yeah, it is a conspiracy theory, not because of the production consumer thing, but because the world simply isn't overpopulated. Okay? That's the facts. All right. Jose Pedroza says, "Hey Bob, stick to theology." Why? Because I answered a question about COVID and viruses. Come on, Jose, give me a break. Question. Happy Thanksgiving, says Gamers. Happy Thanksgiving to you and to everyone on the chat board here. All right, question. The Orthodox believe the atonement was a rescue mission, using Jesus as bait for Satan, whose power over death was taken in Jesus' descent into hell. Can this be reconciled to Catholicism? No. And it would have to be. I mean, the first question would ask is, what version of Orthodoxy is teaching this? Okay, there's several versions of Orthodoxy, but no, as you stated, that would not jive with Catholicism at all. There was this thing kicked around among some of the fathers, just a very few, about the ransom theory of the atonement. Okay, it stuck around. A few medievals had kicked it around, but it was just a peripheral idea. Okay, the ransom theory wherein Jesus was a ransom for the devil, binding God and things of that nature, but it never stuck. And there's a good reason why, because God doesn't play with the devil that way. The devil really has nothing to do with the atonement. Okay, that's basic fact number one. The atonement is between God the Father and God the Son. That's it. If the devil knew that, he would have done everything he could to stop it. And that's exactly what 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 8 says. If the powers that be knew what God had planned, they would have done everything they could to stop it. And that's why it's a secret between the Father and the Son. It's the mystery, you see, that was finally revealed to us and in these last days, as the Gospels say. Okay. And the devil never knew God was going to do this. As I said last week, the devil thought he had God trapped. And he never had an inkling that God would stoop so low as to become a man so that Christ, as the man, could perform the atonement for the Father, which was to restore the honor of the Father, okay, and to appease his wrath. So it's completely within the Trinity, the atonement is. The devil has nothing, there's no ransom, there's no whatever power over death. Jesus descended to hell, and that's all mixed up too. Okay, this idea that Jesus went down to Hades, he went down to the grave is where he went for 3 days. He didn't go down to hell. If he went down there in his vivified state, that was to tell the people that they were damned. Okay, because he did actually rise from the dead. So the whole thing pivoted on Jesus's death and resurrection. If he could perform those two actions, then the people that were now in hell would stay there forever. There would be no release. And that's what he would go down to hell for, to tell them that. Okay. But it has nothing to do with the atonement. It just has something to do with the sentence that's on them, on the people that are in Hades. All right, let me go on. Question: God doesn't need glory. We give glory to God for our own well-being, not his. What do you think of that statement? That's false. Okay. I mean, over and over again, God says he does things for his glory. Okay. From Old to New Testament, it's just saturated with that thought. Okay. Somebody here is just trying to twist the truth to make it a state of mind of the human being. And that's not going to fly. Okay. False. Question. We got a couple minutes left. Orthodox. Okay. Orthodox believe heaven and hell are the same, the fire of God's holiness. If one hates God, it is eternal burning. If one loves God, it is eternal bliss. No. The fire of God is just a metaphor that we use of God's actions. Okay, it has nothing to do with heaven and hell. Fire is always used in that sense of purification. Okay, so, but it cannot be applied in the way that it's being applied there. Okay. All right. See what else we got. I'll try to go a few minutes over if there's a lot of questions here. Clinton says, "Hi, Dr. Stentz. What is your response to the notion of synodality and the idea that everybody should be consulted? Is this how the church has worked historically?" No, this is Francis's idea, his new idea of synodality. You know, that he was saying he wasn't even going to, run the final conclusion or findings of the synod by the bishops, that he was going to allow, just ordinary lay people. And this guy he doesn't know what he's doing. Okay. He just doesn't know what he's doing. And this is all going down the wrong direction. The church has a hierarchy for a reason, because these men are qualified to judge these issues. They have spent their whole lives, at least the good ones, okay, the ones that are doing their job. They have spent their whole lives studying these things and preparing for them. God's given them the gifts for this, okay? Not to every Tom, Dick, and Harry that's on the street. So this is a ridiculous idea that the Pope is proposing, okay? And it is totally against our tradition, which is not unusual to see him do, okay? All right, Robert Dean says, question: on the last day, what happens to those who are not caught up? Do they remain on the earth while it is destroyed by fire? No, they're all going to be raised. Um, their bodies are going to be raised, and they're all going to be up in the air, off the earth. They will be judged, and the universe is going to be destroyed. Okay, so at some point that's going to happen. They're all going to be off the earth and in judgment, and the universe is going to collapse. Okay, so okay. Question. I would simply like to know if Protestants are outright heretics. When I Google it, I can't get a yes or no. Is it wrong to call Protestants Christians? Are they technically not Christian? Okay. So, you're always going to get this question, whether it's Protestants or whoever it is out in the world. Okay. Officially speaking, to be a Christian, you have to be a Catholic. Okay. But God saves other people other than those in the Catholic Church. That's a fact. Okay. It's going to be hard to get salvation if you're outside the Catholic Church, but it is theoretically possible. Okay. God is no respecter of persons. If there is someone outside the Catholic Church that obeys the laws of God, as Pius IX said in Quanto, then God, with due respect for them as a abiding law obeyer, can receive eternal life. Okay, that's right from the mouth of the Pope in his encyclical 1864. As I said, it's going to be hard to get there, and you may be saved in spite of your affiliation with Protestantism, okay, or any other kind of religion. You will be saved in spite of that, because God has mercy on you and judges your life, and it's pleasing to Him, and He can reward you with eternal life. Okay, but so there you have your answer. Okay. Now, let's deal with this heretic thing. Okay. Most Protestants grow up and don't even know what Catholicism is. Okay. Much less know that they're disobeying the doctrines of the Catholic Church. Now, they may grow up later and find out, they may not. Okay. And they would be in what we call invincible ignorance, because they just never have the opportunity. Most Protestants are like that. Okay. So in that sense, they're invincibly ignorant, and that's what Pius IX was talking about. What do you do with those people? They don't deliberately disobey doctrines of the Catholic Church. They were just brought up that way. That's all they know. Okay. So we put those people in a different class. We don't call them heretics. The ones we call heretics are those who know what the Catholic doctrine is and decide to go against it. Okay. Now, there's a lot of Protestants out there like that they've thought it all out and they've come to their conclusion. They're not going to bow to the Pope. Okay. Well, yeah. Well, then you have a heretic on your hands. Okay. So you got two classes, at least two classes. You may have more. And, I'm glad God's the judge. He's going to judge every one of them based on what they know. And only He can do that, because He knows everyone's heart, everyone's motives, everything that they have ever done, thought, said. He knows it all. Only He can judge them. Thank God He's the judge. Okay, so we'll leave it at that. On this earth, we're going to have all kinds of mixtures here, there, and everywhere. Sorting them out is a big task, but at least we have the basic categories. All right. Protestants love to say the Catholics are not Christian and that we are. Yeah, of course they do. Okay, because we believe something different than they do. That's the way they were brought up. Okay. And sometimes they see the light and they become Catholic. Sometimes they don't. You get all 57 varieties out there of reactions to the Catholic Church. Okay. Again, God's going to judge their heart to decide, you know, were you true blue? Okay. Or were you just playing a game? And he's the only one that can judge that. All right. Yes, that's a good way to put it. Protestants have some elements of truth. For that matter, so do the Muslims. Okay, so does Immanuel Kant. Everybody has elements of truth. If you didn't have elements of truth, you wouldn't be able to live in this world. You see, so and the Catholic Church has always been known to take what's good and true from any part of any religion or group or whatever it is and utilize it and throw out the bad. That's the least that we can do. Okay. But yes, everybody has elements of truth. And, we'll just leave it at that. All right. Question. Where would a Thomas say Christ's horse from Revelation comes from if they believe animal souls are annihilated upon death? Well, that's just symbolic language there, Josh. In Apocalypse chapter 19, the white horse, and the one in Apocalypse 6, the white horse there, it's all symbolic language. It doesn't mean Jesus is going to come back on a literal horse. All right. Okay, let me see if we have anything else. Ed Raz, hi Ed, how you doing? In your view, should it be normal of a Catholic to bypass purgatory and enter heaven directly with God's grace? Can we be made sinless? If not, assuming non-mortal sins, can we still be called righteous? Yes, to answer your last question first. As long as you have sanctifying grace in your soul, you're righteous. Okay, that's the whole thing, is that the sanctifying grace has changed the quality of our soul. And that's why God can call us righteous, because we are righteous. That was the whole issue between the Catholic Church and Luther. See, Luther was the one who said, well, if you have any kind of sin, you can't be righteous. And you can only assume the righteousness of Christ, and therefore God's going to call you righteous, not because you're righteous, but because Christ's alien righteousness is what God's looking at. And that's totally false. Okay? We believe in infused sanctifying grace, which changes the quality of your soul, which makes it righteous. Makes it righteous. Okay? That's the key word. Makes, creates. As far as purgatory, let's put it this way. Theoretically, no Catholic should go to purgatory. We have enough plenary indulgences available through the church that not one of us who's astute enough to know what the church has and take advantage of it should go to purgatory. Okay? Unless you're caught between the last plenary indulgence you got and the time you die, okay, there should be no excuse to go to purgatory. I mean, what more grace can God offer you? He's saying, here, go to Mass, go to confession, do this and this and this, and they're not hard. And you don't have to go to purgatory at all. I mean, how easy can he make it? Talk about the grace of God in overabundance. The Catholics have it made. That's the one reason you might want to be Catholic. If you're looking for incentive, there it is, right there. No reason to go to purgatory. Okay? So that's how I'll leave your question. Brian says, please pray for my daughter, Bridget, 22-year-old, having a same-sex relationship. I feel for you, Brian. I really do. Everybody say a prayer for Brian's daughter today. Maybe if all of us together, we can storm heaven with our prayers for Bridget. Okay, everybody, please say a prayer. All right, question. I think you would be an excellent apologist against Islam. Do you ever plan on devoting time into Islam and proving Muhammad is not a prophet? No. I just have absolutely no tendency in that direction. I have a hard enough time keeping up with Catholicism and all its problems, much less worry about Islam. I don't mean to be crass about that, but I'm just saying I just don't have the time. Somebody else is going to have to do that. And there's a lot of good guys out there that know their stuff and that deal. Even James White is good at that. So let's hope he keeps his interest over there with the Muslims. Question: what is the firmament? Is it the atmosphere or the ether? It would be the ether. The atmosphere is made up of nitrogen, oxygen, or little argon, carbon dioxide, all those basic elements. Mostly nitrogen, about 78% is nitrogen. And that forms the cycle, where nitrogen comes down to the soil and goes back up, and it keeps going around and around in that cycle. I forget, there's a special name for it. Ether would be the most discrete substance of nature's creation, or not nature's creation, nature's products. In other words, if you take nitrogen, carbon dioxide, oxygen that's in the air, what is in the atoms of each of the nitrogen molecules? Okay, so you have N2, which would be two nitrogen atoms making a nitrogen molecule. The question would be, what's inside the nitrogen molecule or the nitrogen atom? Okay, well, just like any other atom, it's mostly space. But then how can it be empty? How can it be nothing? Well, it can't be nothing. It has to be something. What is that something? Well, that something is the ether. That's the firmament. Okay. That's the lowest, smallest, most compact, most discrete substance that exists in this universe is the ether. Okay. The atoms, we just talked about nitrogen atom. Its nucleus and its electrons are 20 orders of magnitude bigger than the smallest particle of the ether. Okay, that's pretty big. 20 orders of magnitude. Okay, you know what a magnitude is. It's by the power of 10 is one magnitude. Okay, so you can imagine what 20 orders of magnitude are. That's how discrete we're talking about with the ether. So it's something totally different than atoms and molecules. Okay. All right. Ed says, I met a group of Protestants that believe in infused righteousness and reject the alien righteousness concept. Well, that's pretty good. Purchased electronic copies of your books last night on this topic and plan to share concepts with them from your books with them. Thanks, Ed. Appreciate that. Good job. Believe in infused righteousness. See if you can get a name on that, Ed, and pass it by me. I'd like to see who that is, or if they have a name. Father Michael Rodriguez, do as the Bible says, test the spirits. Personally, I believe he is true. Okay. So I'll need to know a little bit more about him. Siobhan McNeenan. I love that name, Siobhan. My daughter is named Siobhan. And she spells it just like you do. Straight from the Irish. Yeah, obviously I'm Italian. My wife's Irish. She named my daughter Siobhan. So that's where that comes from. But yeah, if you want me to know more about Father Michael Rodriguez, I'd be happy to look at it for you. Joe Bell says, the question of are laws meant to be broken? I wonder what and how every cardinal would personally respond. Okay. Siobhan McNeenan says St. Paul was of small stature, I believe. Yes. I didn't know Paul was being tested in his letters. You really are a good exegete. Well, thank you, Chaldean. Yeah, he was being tested. He says that once or twice. Basically that he's under the gun. That God expects him to do a good job. That's why he's so worried. That's why he says at the end, I believe I have fought the good fight. Because the judge is going to judge me. I mean, he makes it known through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. He makes it known. Okay, St. Paul, pray for us. Please pray for me. All right, Mad Mechanic says, please pray for me with all this stuff with the clergy and Biden and et cetera, ad infinitum evil. I have been smoking weed and drinking, not going to church. My heart is broken. Oh my gosh. Please pray for me, he says. All right, here's another prayer list for the chat group. All right, everybody say a prayer for Mad Mechanic to stop smoking weed and stop drinking. Okay, and start going to church. This Sunday, Mad Mechanic, I want you to go to church. Okay, stop fooling around. You know it's wrong. Start looking in the right direction. You're only going to get yourself into big trouble. Okay? That's orders from Robert Sungenis. Okay. All right. Pray. Don't be lazy. You're always getting on my case, Lawrence. Father Rodriguez joined up with the Fatima Center crowd after he got in trouble with his New Mexico bishop. Okay. Yeah, well, watch out for that Fatima Center crowd, okay? I think they're living on a dream. There you go, Karen. You tell them. Mad Mechanic, do not let Satan win in your life. You are made for God. Get back to church. Your heart will heal as you attend Mass. Go to confession and receive the Holy Eucharist. Way to go, Karen. Hey, look, you got all these people supporting you. Sandra Cardinal. Hang in there, Mad Mechanic. Hard enough to be a mechanic, praying for you. There you go. All right. All right. Shamunian. Question: how would you respond to an Arian who says Jesus is the firstborn of all creation in Colossians, proving he was the first creature of God? Because the word firstborn does not necessarily mean something in creation, something that has to be created. It's a term also for rank. Okay, the Greek word there is a word for rank, or it could be used in the chronological sense. Not necessarily, though. It can be used in two different ways. That's why we would say that. Question: how would you answer an Arian who says, since Jesus is the only begotten, since he cannot be eternal? How would you answer an Arian who says, since Jesus is the only begotten Son, he cannot be eternal? Because only begotten, monogenes, is not a term that applies to his human essence. Okay, that's where they're making their mistake. It applies to his divine essence. All right. How is that? Well, I mean, how does God exist from all eternity? Who knows? Think about that. God has existed forever. No beginning. Okay. Can your mind contemplate that? No. Okay. So can you contemplate an only begotten that comes from the Father in an eternal sense? No, you can't. Okay. So just like you can't contemplate that, you can't contemplate the fact that the Father exists from all eternity, or call it God if you want, exists from all eternity. We can't contemplate that. Okay, we have a concept of it, but we don't know what it means. We just can't grasp it. Okay, so that idea is not going to help them. Okay, you can find Father Michael Rodriguez at Queen of Peace Media, I think. Do you have an opinion on the warning or illumination of conscience? Yes. Don't believe it. That's something some Catholic conjured up somewhere and tried to, say that this is some factual thing. No, it's not. The church doesn't teach it. Scripture doesn't teach it. Okay. It's some modern idea that came out somewhere. This is why I'm telling you, don't get hooked up on these things. Okay. You don't know who's telling the truth. And you don't know when the devil's speaking in place of somebody. Okay. It's best to just leave. You don't need this stuff. Okay. You got warning of conscience every day. God gave you a thriving, busy conscience. My conscience works overtime. I say the slightest thing wrong to somebody and I feel bad. That's because my conscience is working on me. I look at something I shouldn't be looking at. I feel bad. Why? Because my conscience is working on me. So I don't need some big conscience, whatever it is that they're, proposing, that's going to tell me what my sins are. I already know what they are. Okay. This little thing inside of me, it keeps bugging me all day long. All right. That's what we need. That's all you need. And you'll be safe that way. All right. How would you respond to it? Okay, we already looked at that. Benedictus Caesar Andra, talking about the Nephilim. Do they have anything to do with aliens as ancient? No. Don't believe any of that stuff either. Okay. That should be taken off the air. Okay. All right. Let's see. I'm looking for a question here. Hi, Sir Robert Sungenis. How can I avail your books? Okay, go to see up right there, our website, robertsungenis.org. All the books you could ever want. Okay, you can get them in hardback, paperback, or PDF. So go at it. Okay, go visit the website. And on the top of the website, there's going to be a label that says books. So just click on that and we'll take you to page after page after page of books. Okay, all there for you. And I don't know, we don't have the 20% discount anymore, right, Lawrence? I think that's over with. Why don't we put that back up, say, December, starting December 1st. We'll have the 20% discount for all you Christmas shoppers. Okay, 20% starting December 1st, and we'll run that for 2 weeks until December 15th. How's that? Okay, so take advantage of that. And I'm still also looking for one of my monthly donors dropped out this week. And so I'm looking for replacements. People need to help replace him because we need your funds to help us keep going here. Okay. So when you visit the website, if you would go up to the monthly donation button and, give $5, $10, $15, whatever you could afford per month. It's not much. So if you could help, I'd appreciate it. Um, do we have a new book published? Yeah, we just published the Keys Over the Christian Kingdom about the papacy. Oh, let me tell you something about that book. 600 and some odd pages of all the history of the papacy to support the papacy, from the fathers, the bishops, the all the people that were involved. Now, look, here's what we did. I didn't do it. I edited the book and formatted it, but the guy who did the work is John Colarafi. And by the way, there was this rumor going around that John Colarafi is a sedevacantist. He is not and was not. He at one time was a member of the SSPX. He is no longer a member of the SSPX. Okay, so wherever rumor that started, I mean, I'm going to nip that right here. John is the major author of this book that we just published about the papacy, and this is what John did. John read from cover to cover all of the volumes of the Minge series, Minge. Now, Minge, if you know anything about the Church Fathers, is the one that has collated all the writings, every scrap of writing from anybody that was in the patristic era. Not all, all the major fathers, of course, Augustine, Chrysostom, all of them, okay, Latin and Greek fathers, but even the minor ones you've never heard of, okay. There are 360 volumes of the Minge series, 360 volumes, and they're all that thick, okay. John read all of them from cover to cover, getting all the information about the papacy that he could find that was worthy to print, and put it in this one volume of 600 and some odd pages. Okay? The CSEL volumes, the CS, what was it? CSEL and the CSCO volumes. There's multitudes of them. John read all of those from cover to cover over a course of about 10, 15 years, and collated all the information that's in this book. So this is an invaluable book. There is nothing like it ever written in the Catholic market or Protestant market. Okay. So you have a treasure here and it's all footnoted. We've got 2,100 footnoted sources in this book from the original languages of the fathers and medievals and everybody else who talked about this subject on the papacy. Okay. So this is a scholarly work that you will never, ever come across anywhere except here. Okay. And unfortunately, it's been sitting on the shelf for 20 years until I rang the phone on the other author and said, "What are you doing with this book? We need to get this out." And we finally got the ball rolling, and I finally got it printed up, published, and it's ready to go. And it's on our website. Okay. Keys Over the Christian Kingdom. So take advantage of it. All right. I probably should get going here. I'm getting tired. I got to go. Oh, here is I think this is the question the guy asked last week. Does the net centripetal force from the rotating CMB sphere, fictitious forces, cause a reduction in scale, fourth dimension, of all matter in the observable geocentric universe, which is time? No, because time has nothing to do with inertial forces. all the inertial forces will do is either slow down or speed up light, okay? Or they could slow down or speed up material objects, but it has nothing to do with the absolute time, okay? If you're talking about measuring time, well, yeah, anytime you affect light and you're using light as your source measurement, it's going to affect the measurement that you come out with. But that doesn't affect time per se. Time is time. Okay. Whether we can calculate it correctly or not, that's another story. But time is time. Okay. And that's one thing that Newton had right. The measurement of time, which is what Einstein talked about, well, he's right there too. Because anything that affects the speed of light, it's going to affect the measurement of time. But it's affecting the measurement of time, not time itself. Okay. You have to keep those two things distinguished. Once you know that light speed can be slowed down and it's going to affect your time measurement, then obviously you have two different time concepts. You have an absolute time concept and you have a relative time concept. Okay. But it's your job as the observer to keep those things separate. Otherwise, you're going to get confused and you're never going to be able to know what is what. Okay. So to answer I think I answered your question. All right. Uh, Without Judas, the prophecy would not be fulfilled. There would be no salvation, right? Well, God would have figured out another way. Okay. God's intent on giving us salvation, he's going to figure it out. Judas could come or go. All right. Um, there would have been another way that he would have been handed over to the Romans to be crucified. But you can't do without Adam, because if you do without Adam, you do without Christ. If you don't have Adam, you don't have Christ. That's all there is to it. It's not like if you don't have Adam, you don't have Judas. If you don't have Adam, you don't have Christ, the basis for the salvation. That's the key that we were talking about. Sir, how about the myths in the Bible? Tower of Babel and Noah's Ark. Samson is a myth parallel with Hercules, and Noah's Ark is also a myth parallel with Gilgamesh. Tower of Babel. No, it's just the opposite. Okay. All these other sources, like Hercules with the Greeks, they're getting their stories from the Bible and they're making them the way they want to make them. Zeus or Hercules, or the Romans got Hercules, what Zeus is. I keep getting those mixed up. The Greeks have Zeus, or vice versa. You see, this is the thing that we've been taught. This bill of goods that the Bible was written by some Jewish people coming back from Babylonian captivity who copied the Mesopotamian sources and all their exploits with their gods, and the Jews made it into this Jehovah God. It's just the opposite. Okay, we can tell by the Toledoths, starting from Adam to Seth to Enosh to Kenan, all those, that they carry these records with them, pre-flood and post-flood. And the other cultures got a hold of these Toledoths that the original people of God carried around, and then distorted them and made their own stories, like Hercules or the Gilgamesh epic or who else, whatever. Okay. So it's just the opposite of what these scholars are telling us today. And we can prove this. I mean, of the Mesopotamian story of Enuma Elish, the latest manuscript we have of that comes from 1200 BC. And they base all this stuff and they make it look like like the Enuma Elish story came from, Mesopotamia, 3500 BC, all this stuff. Well, how can you do that when your latest manuscript comes from 1200 BC? Okay, so and what was before the Enuma Elish? It was the stories that Moses was writing in 1400 BC when they were just coming out of Egypt. Okay, in 1440 BC, which is 200 years before the latest story from the so-called Mesopotamian era. All right, so it's just the opposite of what these guys have been telling us. And of course, they would have to have it that way, because if it was the way I'm describing to you, they'd have to bow the feet to the Pope. You see, but they don't want to do that, so they just reverse the order. It was just a big lie, is what it is. When will you live stream your college lectures? Oh, there's a good idea. Never thought about that. Thank you there, Lawrence. You're always on your toes. That's why I pay you the big bucks. Actually, I won't be teaching at the college until January 31st. That's when the next semester starts. So I'll be teaching Tuesdays and Thursdays, New Testament. So yeah, maybe we can tape those classes. You want to come and tape it for me? All right. Shamuan, great interview. Thank you, Lawrence. Oh, by the way, we got a interview I had with Sam Shamuan on justification, not by faith alone. My book, Not by Faith Alone. I talk about faith and works and how to understand them. I think it's about an hour lecture. Lawrence just put it up on our website. So go visit our website and you'll get probably one of the best lectures I think I've done on the faith and works thing in a long time. So take advantage of that. It's free of charge and you'll learn a lot. And thank you, Lawrence, for putting it up there. And thanks to Sam for doing that interview. Yes, thank you, Lawrence, for mentioning that. Okay. All right. Looks like we're running out of questions here, so I'm going to get going. It's almost 11:15 here in the East Coast, so and I'm a little tired, so I've got to go. So happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight and joining the program. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope I have been informative to you, and I hope you will lead a better Christian life because of it. That's all we're here for. And signing off until December the 1st. Boy, this year went by fast. Phew. And don't forget to visit robertsongems.org. Give a little donation if you can. And we got a lot of books, and Lawrence will be putting those on a 20% discount starting December 1st. All right. So we'll see you then. Take care.